The grand hall of the Verne Dominion stood quiet and heavy. High arches of silver metal curved above the audience chamber, where the alien nobles waited in perfect silence. Blue flames floated in the air, giving a dim and cold light. The queen's armor stood in the middle of the hall, placed on a tall pedestal. It was no ordinary armor. It was a living relic of power, forged from starlight and ancient technology. For centuries it had protected the queen in battle and symbolized the pride of her entire species. But now it was broken. Deep cracks ran across its shining surface. The right shoulder plate had been shattered, and the energy channels that once glowed with golden light now flickered weakly. The room smelled of burnt metal and defeat. The recent war against the Karth Dominion had left the queen's army victorious, but at a terrible cost. The queen herself had barely survived, and her armor, which no alien craftsman could fully repair, had been declared beyond restoration. The queen entered the hall slowly, her tall frame covered in a dark robe. Her silver eyes studied the armor from a distance. Her steps were soft, but every noble felt the weight of her presence. She stopped in front of the armor and lifted her hand gently, almost as if afraid to touch it. The armor was sacred. It was more than protection. It was her legacy. But something was wrong. The armor no longer looked broken. The cracks were gone. The dull metal gleamed once again as if it had been newly forged. Every joint, every circuit, every piece was repaired perfectly. It was better than before. Stronger, smoother, alive, with a faint hum of power that even the Verne scientists could not explain. The queen's sharp voice broke the silence. "Who repaired this armor?" she demanded. No one spoke. Every noble looked around nervously, whispering in low tones. The court engineers stepped forward, bowing deeply. The eldest among them said, "My queen, none of us dared touch it. The armor was sealed in the vault until this morning. We found it, whole." Her silver eyes narrowed. "Then who entered the vault?" she asked. The engineers looked terrified. "Only authorized maintenance crews, Majesty. But none of them are Verne. They are off-worlders." "Off-worlders?" the queen repeated. Her voice grew colder. "You allowed another species to approach my armor?" The hall grew tense. The nobles whispered in shock. Among the Verne, the armor of the queen was sacred. To let a non-Verne even look at it was unthinkable. The engineers bowed deeper. "It was an accident, Majesty. The human engineer team was repairing the ventilation ducts nearby. We did not think—" Before he could finish, a low, metallic sound echoed through the hall. The armor moved. The chest plate shimmered, and its energy core pulsed once like a heartbeat. The queen stepped back slightly, her eyes widening. She could feel it. The armor was alive again, perfectly synced to her life energy. Whoever repaired it did more than fix metal. They had restored its soul. She looked around the court again, her voice trembling for the first time in years. "Who repaired this armor?" she asked again, softer this time, almost as if she was afraid of the answer. From the back of the hall, a small voice answered, "I did, Your Majesty." Everyone turned. A human man stepped forward slowly. He was not tall or strong like the Verne soldiers. His hair was dark, his hands covered in oil and burns. His clothes were simple, a gray maintenance uniform with a small patch reading E. Gray, Systems Engineer. He walked with hesitation, stopping a respectful distance from the queen. The nobles murmured angrily. Some even hissed. "A human? Impossible! How could this fragile creature repair the sacred armor?" But the queen raised her hand and the room fell silent. "You," she said, studying him with her bright silver eyes. "You claim to have repaired my armor?" Elias Gray bowed respectfully. "Yes, Your Majesty. It was damaged in several layers, but I thought I could help." "You thought?" The queen's voice was sharp again. "Do you understand what you have touched? That armor is older than your entire species." "I know," Elias said quietly, "but I also know broken things. Machines, ships, engines, they all tell a story if you listen." Yours was crying. The hall fell silent again. The queen tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. "My armor was crying?" she repeated. "Yes," Elias said. The energy lines were twisted as if the armor itself was fighting to stay alive. It wasn't the metal that failed, it was the way the energy flowed inside it. "I only had to listen to what it needed." "You used human tools to do this?" asked one of the Verne scientists in disbelief. "Some," Elias replied, "but mostly my hands and patience. I watched how the circuits moved and realigned them until the flow became calm again." The queen stepped closer. Her long shadow fell over him. You touched the heart of the armor. That is forbidden to anyone but the royal bloodline. Elias lowered his head. Then I'm sorry, Your Majesty. I didn't know the rule. I only wanted to fix what was broken. The Queen studied him for a long moment. The hall was so quiet that everyone could hear the faint hum of the armor behind her. Finally, she turned back to the relic. She touched the chest plate gently, and it glowed with soft golden light. Her reflection shimmered across its surface. The armor recognized her completely, its systems alive again as if reborn. And for the first time in her life, the Queen felt something she could not explain. Her throat tightened. Her eyes burned with emotion. She whispered softly, "It remembers me." The nobles exchanged confused glances. They had never seen their queen display such emotion. She had led them through centuries of conquest with cold logic and unshakable discipline. But now her eyes were wet. She turned back toward Elias. "Human," she said quietly, "you have done something my best scientists could not." "How?" Elias shrugged gently. "I didn't see armor, Majesty. I saw pain. Machines are like people sometimes. They can break in ways you can't see from the outside." The Queen's voice trembled slightly as she spoke again. "You repaired what we thought was lost. Tell me your name." "Elias Gray," he replied. "Elias Gray of Earth," she repeated slowly as if tasting the words. "You are no mere engineer, you are something else." The Queen looked down at the armor again. She could feel its strength returning through her connection to it. The golden light reflected off the tears in her eyes. The hall watched in silent awe as their proud and unbreakable queen stood before the human who had achieved the impossible. Finally, she turned to the crowd. "From this moment," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion, "no one will touch this armor again. It was repaired by the hands of one who understands life itself. Remember this human's name." Elias bowed deeply. "Thank you, Majesty." As the Queen walked away, her mind was heavy with thoughts she had never allowed herself to feel. For the first time, she questioned everything she believed about her people's superiority, and somewhere deep inside, she whispered to herself, "How could something so fragile understand what we could not?" The court remained silent long after she left. The human stood alone in the grand hall, the repaired armor gleaming beside him. The story of the human engineer had just begun, and the galaxy was about to learn what humanity could truly do. Days passed after the strange event in the grand hall, but the story spread through the Verne Dominion faster than any signal across the stars. A human, a simple engineer, had repaired the sacred armor of their queen. Some called it a miracle, others called it a crime. The nobles whispered behind closed doors, angry that their queen had shown tears for a human's work. But among the common people, whispers carried respect. They spoke of the little creature from Earth who had touched the armor and made it live again. Inside the royal ship Eclipsera, Elias Gray continued his quiet work. He moved through the mechanical corridors, checking energy conduits and adjusting circuits. He preferred silence. He did not understand alien politics or royal traditions. To him it had been simple. Something was broken and he had fixed it. That was what engineers did, but nothing was simple anymore. Wherever Elias went, alien eyes followed him. Some filled with curiosity, others with suspicion. Verne scientists requested to study him. Nobles debated whether he had broken sacred law, and guards watched his every step. Yet through all the noise, one command had silenced them all. "No one will question him," said the Queen. "He is under my protection." Elias didn't know why she said that, but he was grateful. One evening, the Queen sent a message. She requested Elias to appear in the royal chamber. The message was brief. "Come, bring your tools." When he arrived, two tall guards escorted him through shining corridors into a wide chamber that overlooked the stars. The Queen stood there, her repaired armor shining under soft blue lights. She was not wearing it. She stood beside it, her hands folded behind her back, her expression unreadable. "Elias Gray," she said as he entered, "do you know what this armor means to my people?" He hesitated. "I've heard some things. They say it's sacred." "It is more than sacred," she said slowly. "It carries the spirit of our ancestors. Every monarch wears it from the moment they ascend to the throne. When I thought it was lost, I believed my reign was cursed." Elias looked at the armor carefully. "It isn't cursed. It just needed help. The energy lines were out of balance. Once I fixed that, it responded again. Her eyes narrowed slightly. You speak as if it were alive. Elias smiled faintly. In a way it is. Machines remember their purpose. They react to care, to intention. You call it sacred, maybe that's your word for the same thing I feel. The Queen was silent for a long time. Then she turned toward the window where stars shimmered against the black sky. Your people are strange. You have no grand empire, no ancient bloodline, no sacred armor, yet you understand things we have forgotten. Elias shrugged. Maybe it's because we break things more often. When you're fragile, you learn how to fix what you love. The Queen's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, but softer than before. You speak boldly for one so small. Small doesn't mean weak, Your Majesty, Elias said gently. Sometimes small things see what giants ignore. The Queen looked at him, her silver eyes glowing faintly. Perhaps, she said quietly. Come with me. She led him to a private workshop deep within the ship. The walls glowed with soft green light. Dozens of ancient weapons and devices were stored there, each broken, rusted, or incomplete. These, she said, are relics of our history. Our scientists tried to repair them, but none succeeded. She pointed toward a blade that floated in the air, glowing faintly blue. This sword was used by my ancestor 1,000 years ago. When he died, it shut down. We thought it could never awaken again. Elias examined the blade carefully. The energy core is still alive. It's just sleeping. Sleeping, the Queen repeated. Yes, Elias said. Machines like this, old ones, they respond to emotion. The energy field is bonded to the user's life signature. Maybe it can wake if someone connects to it again. Then try, she said softly. Elias hesitated. I'm not Vern. She stepped closer, her tall shadow falling over him. You touched the heart of my armor. That was impossible too. Do it, Elias nodded. He took a deep breath and gently touched the sword's hilt. The moment his fingers made contact, a faint pulse of light ran along the blade. The air vibrated with soft energy. For a second, the Queen saw the weapon glow brighter than it had in centuries. Then the light faded again, but slower this time, as if reluctant to sleep. The Queen's eyes widened. You awakened it. Even if for a moment, Elias smiled lightly. It just needed someone to listen again. She stared at him for a long time. In that silent room, surrounded by relics of her people's greatness, the Queen felt something she hadn't felt in ages. Hope. Later that night, the Queen stood alone on the observation deck, thinking deeply. She remembered the wars her people had fought, the planets they had conquered, the endless pride that defined the Vern. They believed themselves perfect, beyond the need to learn from others. Yet this fragile human had done what their greatest minds could not. Her thoughts were interrupted when her old advisor entered. Majesty, he said carefully, the council demands that the human be questioned. Some say his work on the armor was unnatural. The Queen turned sharply. Unnatural, to repair, to restore life to what we abandoned? The advisor bowed. Forgive me, Majesty. I speak only their fears. They worry that he may have altered the armor's power. The Queen walked toward her armor. The soft gold lines across its surface pulsed gently as if breathing. She rested her hand on it. The armor responded instantly, a faint hum filling the air. It was stronger than ever, smoother, purer, alive. He did not alter it, she said. He perfected it. The advisor frowned. Then you mean to defend him? I mean to learn from him, she replied firmly. Tell the council to leave the human alone. The advisor bowed again and left without another word. When the Queen turned back, she found Elias standing quietly at the doorway. He looked unsure whether to speak. I didn't mean to overhear, he said, but you don't have to protect me. I'll be fine, the Queen shook her head. You do not understand, Elias Gray. The last time I showed emotion before my people was when my mother died. Today I cried for something you repaired. That has never happened before. Elias looked surprised. I didn't mean to cause trouble. You caused truth, she said softly. And truth always causes trouble. They both stood silent for a moment. The sound of the armor's hum filled the room. Finally, she spoke again. You said machines are like people, that they remember how they were treated. Tell me, human, do you believe that applies to hearts as well? Elias smiled faintly. Yes, Majesty. Hearts break the same way, but they can be repaired too, if someone cares enough. Her eyes softened again, though she quickly turned away, hiding the emotion behind her calm face. You are strange, Elias Gray. You see the world not as it is, but as it could be. Perhaps that is what makes humans dangerous. Or hopeful, Elias said. Perhaps both. The next day, the Queen ordered Elias to assist her army's engineers. Together, they began studying the human methods of repair, patient, careful, emotional. The Verne scientists were amazed to discover new efficiencies in energy flow and weapon design. Word spread through the fleet. Human logic and feeling worked in harmony, creating machines that seemed almost alive. But not everyone was pleased. In the shadows of the Dominion, jealous nobles and rival commanders watched the Queen's growing trust in the human. They whispered plans of rebellion. To them, a human's influence over their queen was unacceptable. And while the Queen studied progress, the storm of jealousy was rising beyond her sight. Still, she could not forget the moment the armor came back to life, the moment she saw tears in her own reflection. She looked at the stars one last time before leaving her chamber and whispered quietly, "Perhaps the smallest hands can repair the biggest wounds." The galaxy did not yet know it, but the bond between a queen and a human engineer was about to change everything. Only 3 weeks after Elias Gray's repairs had changed the Queen's armor, reports of unrest spread through the Verne Dominion. Border colonies were rebelling. A rival race called the Karth, war-hungry, creatures of iron skin and red eyes, had formed an alliance with jealous Verne nobles who believed the Queen had grown too soft since the humans' arrival. Inside, the royal ship Eclipsera alarms began to sound. The Queen stood in the command chamber, her silver armor glowing softly with power. The stars outside the window flickered red as enemy ships appeared one by one. Her advisor, General Kor, spoke with urgency. "Majesty, the enemy fleet outnumbers us 3-1. Their energy disruptors can disable our weapons instantly. We must retreat," the Queen's voice was calm. "We do not retreat. Prepare the fleet for defensive formation." Kor hesitated. "Majesty, the new armor, the human's design, it has not been tested in battle." The Queen glanced toward Elias, who stood beside a group of engineers, holding a small control pad. "It will be tested now," she said. The battle began with a storm of light. Red and blue energy beams crossed the darkness of space. Ships exploded like stars being born and dying in seconds. The Queen's fleet fought bravely, but the enemy's disruptor weapons spread waves of interference through the battlefield. One by one, Verne mechs and drones fell silent, their power cores disabled. The command center filled with the sound of failing systems. "Disruptor field increasing," shouted one officer. "We're losing power." Elias looked at his tablet. He saw the readings drop sharply. Every ship's core was failing except one, the Queen's armor. He turned toward her. "Your Majesty, your armor isn't affected. The new human circuits I added, they resist the energy drain." The Queen nodded. "Then I fight alone." She stepped forward and activated the armor. Gold light wrapped around her body as the plates closed into place. The hum of power filled the air, strong and clear. She drew her twin plasma blades and leapt from the deck into her personal launch pod. The crew watched in awe as the pod shot into space. Moments later, a streak of gold fire darted across the stars, the Queen herself flying through enemy ships like a comet. "She's fighting without backup," Kor shouted. Elias was already moving. "Then we'll make her backup," he said. In the engineering bay, Elias worked furiously. The disruptor waves jammed every circuit, but he had studied enough alien tech to understand its weaknesses. He began rerouting energy channels through human-built stabilizers. His fingers moved fast, his mind focused only on one goal: keep the Queen alive. Outside, the Queen was a blur of motion. Her armor moved faster than ever before, responding perfectly to her thoughts. The repairs had made it lighter, smoother, alive. Her plasma blades tore through enemy drones like ribbons of fire. But the enemy fleet was endless. Dozens of ships turned toward her, charging their cannons. "Majesty, pull back," Kor shouted through the comm. The Queen's voice came back, calm but fierce. "Not until my people are safe." Elias felt the ship shake as more explosions struck the hull. He looked up at the projection screen showing her position. She was surrounded. "Come on," he muttered. "Don't fail me now." He typed in the last command and slammed his hand on the console. "Reboot complete. All systems restart." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, one by one, the Verne ships flickered with light. Engines roared back to life. The disruptor field began to collapse. The Queen's fleet was alive again. Cheers filled the control room. "Human stabilizers are working," an engineer cried. Elias exhaled in relief, but his screen flashed red again. The enemy had deployed something new, a void cannon, a weapon powerful enough to tear apart space itself. If it fired, everything within range would vanish. "Queen," Elias shouted through the communicator. "They're charging a void weapon. You have less than 2 minutes." Her voice came back steady. "Then we end this before it fires." Elias stared at the data. The weapon drew its energy from a central core, a massive reactor buried inside the enemy flagship. Destroying it from outside was impossible, but if he could override the field frequency, he hesitated. The only way to stop it was by directly linking the Queen's armor to the disruptor pulse, using her suit as a relay. It would overload her system. He looked around. "I can reroute the pulse, but it'll send all the feedback into her armor," he said. Kor looked horrified. "She'll die." Elias clenched his jaw. "If we don't, everyone dies." Without waiting for approval, he began typing rapidly. Sparks flew from the console. The ship trembled violently as power surged through the circuits. Sweat ran down his face, but his hands didn't stop. Come on," he whispered. Outside, the Queen saw the enemy flagship charging its massive cannon. The air shimmered with deadly energy. She could feel her armor reacting, energy surging within. "Elias, what are you doing?" she asked. "I'm giving you a chance," he said through the comm. "Aim for the core when I say now." She didn't argue. She trusted him. 5 seconds, Elias said. He redirected the power lines, pushing his system to the limit. The console glowed white-hot. His vision blurred, but he could see the numbers counting down. 3, 2, 1, now! The Queen raised her blades, her armor glowing brighter than ever before. She flew straight toward the enemy flagship. The armor's human-forged circuits released a massive pulse of energy, perfectly tuned to disrupt the void cannon's field. A beam of golden light struck the enemy core. For a moment, everything went silent. Then, the flagship exploded. The shockwave spread across space like a sunrise, tearing through the enemy fleet. Ships broke apart, drifting lifelessly into the dark. The Vern fleet cheered, their Queen's golden light shining through the smoke of victory. But on the command deck, Elias collapsed beside the console, exhausted and shaking. The system was fried, smoke rising from the controls. He coughed and looked at the screen. "Please be alive," he whispered. Static filled the channel for a moment, then her voice came through, soft but clear. "Elias Gray, we have won," he smiled weakly. "Good. Because I'm not fixing all those ships again." Even through the comm, he could hear her laugh, a real, warm laugh that no one in the Dominion had ever heard before. Hours later, the Queen returned to the ship. The Grand Hall was filled with light and the sound of victory. Soldiers and nobles bowed deeply as she entered, still wearing the armor that had saved them all. Elias stood at the edge of the room, tired but alive. When she saw him, she walked straight toward him. The crowd parted in silence. "Elias Gray," she said, her voice echoing through the chamber. "You risked your life for mine and for my people." He shook his head. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," she said softly. "You did what no one else could." She raised her hand, touching the armor's chest plate. "This armor was forged by our ancestors, but it found new life through your hands. You gave it a human heart, and through it you gave me courage." Elias looked up at her, unsure what to say. "I only fixed the wiring," he said quietly. The Queen smiled faintly. "Then perhaps courage lies in the wiring." The crowd began to cheer, chanting the Queen's name and surprisingly the humans as well. For the first time in history, a human name echoed across the great halls of an alien empire. That night, as the celebrations continued, the Queen stood alone on the observation deck once more. The stars were quiet now, peaceful after the storm of war. She spoke softly, knowing her words would not be heard. "Elias Gray of Earth," she whispered, "you showed us what it means to fight not with pride, but with purpose." She looked at her reflection in the window, the golden armor shining faintly behind her. "And for that," she said, her voice filled with emotion, "you have repaired more than metal. You have repaired me." The war was over. The stars, once filled with fire and smoke, now looked calm again. The wrecks of enemy ships drifted quietly through space, silent reminders of the price of pride and power. The Vern Dominion had survived because of a miracle shaped by human hands. Elias Gray woke in the medical bay of the royal flagship Eclipsera. The soft white lights above him hurt his eyes. Machines hummed gently beside his bed. His arms were covered with bandages, his voice weak but steady. The door slid open with a whisper and a familiar tall figure entered, the Queen herself. She was no longer wearing her armor. Instead, she wore a simple dark robe, her silver hair tied back. For once, she looked not like a ruler, but like a person. Elias tried to sit up, but she raised her hand slightly. "Rest, engineer," she said softly. "You have done enough for one lifetime." He smiled faintly. "Did we win?" The Queen stepped closer. "We did. The Karth fleet is gone, and the traitor nobles have surrendered. The Dominion stands united again." Elias sighed in relief. "Good. I was worried all my hard work would go to waste." For the first time, the Queen laughed quietly. "Your work has changed more than you know." Later that day, the Queen called for a grand gathering in the Hall of Unity, a place so old that its walls still carried carvings from the first days of the Verne civilization. Thousands of soldiers, nobles, and citizens filled the shining chamber. The entire fleet tuned in through holographic broadcast. In the center of the hall stood Elias, still weak but wearing a clean uniform. He felt nervous under the gaze of so many alien eyes. Some looked at him with respect, others with disbelief. A human standing beside their queen. It was something no one had ever imagined. When the Queen entered, the hall fell silent. She wore her golden armor again, the same one Elias had repaired, now glowing brighter than ever before. Each step she took echoed like thunder through the marble floor. She stopped before the human and turned to face her people. "My people," she said, her voice firm and proud. "You have seen the truth with your own eyes. When our ships fell silent and our pride was broken, it was not our ancient wisdom that saved us. It was not our strength nor our weapons. It was the hands of one who came from a distant world, one who saw our pain and chose to repair it." The crowd murmured softly. Her silver eyes glowed as she raised her voice. "This human," she continued, "Elias Gray of Earth, did not fight with power or fear. He fought with understanding. He saw life in what we called lifeless. He gave heart to what we thought was only metal. He gave us back hope." She turned toward Elias. "Step forward." He did. His legs trembled slightly, but he stood straight. The Queen removed a shining emblem from her armor, a small metal badge shaped like a star holding a tiny wrench in its center. "This mark," she said, "is a new symbol, a bond between two worlds. From this day onward, humanity shall not be seen as servants or lesser beings. They will stand beside us as equals, as builders of peace and protectors of the stars." She placed the emblem on his chest. "And you, Elias Gray, are named the Starlight of the Dominion, the one who mended the unmendable." The hall erupted with sound. Cheers echoed across the chamber. Even the most prideful nobles could not deny the truth they had seen. The Queen, the strongest warrior of their kind, had bowed before a human's courage. Elias bowed his head humbly. "Thank you, Your Majesty." "I only did what I could." The Queen smiled faintly. "Sometimes doing what you can changes everything." After the ceremony, the Queen invited Elias to walk with her on the outer balcony of the ship. The stars spread endlessly before them, calm and bright. The Queen looked at them silently, her voice soft when she finally spoke. "When I first saw you," she said, "I thought you were fragile, like glass in a storm. But now I see I was wrong. You are like water. You flow, you adapt, and you never stop moving. That is why you survive where others fall." Elias looked at her with quiet respect. "Maybe, but glass can be fixed too if someone takes the time." She smiled, her silver eyes reflecting starlight. "You have taught me more than I expected, human. I once believed strength came only from conquest. Now I see it comes from creation, from the will to fix what is broken, not to destroy it." He nodded slowly. "Maybe that's something we humans are good at. We break a lot, so we learn to fix everything." The Queen laughed again, a soft, honest laugh. Then perhaps the universe needed humans after all. Days turned into weeks. Under the Queen's command, the Dominion began rebuilding the worlds destroyed by war. Human engineers and Verne scientists worked side by side, combining logic and emotion, strength and creativity. Together they formed a new alliance called the Forge of Light, a council dedicated to rebuilding peace across the stars. Elias worked as chief designer, teaching the aliens simple human repair methods. The Vern, in turn, shared their advanced energy systems with humanity. Ships became faster, cleaner, and smarter. The two species learned from each other, not through conquest but through cooperation. One evening, as Elias was working alone in the workshop, he heard the soft sound of footsteps. The Queen entered quietly. She was not wearing her armor this time. "I have decided," she said gently. "The armor you repaired will no longer be used for war. It will be placed in the Hall of Memory, as a symbol of peace between our kinds." Elias looked surprised. "You'd give up your armor?" "It's part of who you are." She nodded. "It was part of who I was. But I no longer need it to feel strong. You taught me that." She stepped closer and looked at the armor resting on its stand. It shone softly, golden and calm. It used to carry the spirit of my ancestors. Now it carries your touch, a reminder that even something old can learn something new. Elias smiled. Then maybe that's how peace starts, by fixing something instead of throwing it away. The Queen looked at him for a long moment, then said quietly, "You once told me that machines remember how they were treated. Perhaps hearts do too." "Mine remembers kindness." Elias didn't answer right away. He simply nodded with respect. "And mine remembers courage." A few days later, the Queen sent Elias back to Earth as her personal envoy. The ceremony was quiet but full of warmth. The Queen stood at the hangar gate as he prepared to board his ship. "Will I see you again?" he asked. The Queen's eyes softened. "You will. The stars are wide but not endless, and I owe you many lessons yet to learn," he smiled. "Then I'll keep the workshop open." She gave a small bow, a gesture no Vern had ever given to a human before. "Safe journey, Starlight of Earth." As his ship rose into the sky, Elias looked out the window and saw the Queen standing alone, her golden armor shining behind her like a sunrise. He smiled to himself and whispered, "Goodbye, Majesty." The stars stretched around him, endless and beautiful. Somewhere deep in the black he felt that the universe had changed. Not with fire or fear, but with a single act of repair. Months later, in the Hall of Memory, the Queen stood alone before her armor. The golden surface reflected her calm face. She rested her hand on the chest plate where a small symbol was engraved, the same one she had given to Elias, a star and a wrench. A gentle tear rolled down her cheek, but this time, it was not from sorrow. "It was peace," she whispered softly. "You repaired more than my armor, human. You repaired my heart." The armor hummed quietly in reply, as if remembering the touch of the hands that had brought it back to life. And across the galaxy, from Earth to the farthest stars, the story spread, of the Queen who cried and the human engineer who stepped forward. It became a legend whispered in the spaceports, told by travelers and dreamers alike, that no matter how vast the universe or how strong the empires, sometimes it is not strength or power that changes destiny, but compassion, courage, and the will to fix what others call broken. And that, in the heart of the stars, is what makes humans truly special.